Donald Trump will have 80 candles on his birthday cake today, and he's far from the only leader governing into old age. And it got me thinking, why are there so many old leaders? Is it because we prefer people with experience, or is it too hard to be a young leader among the political establishment? We'll explore both of those ideas in a second, but first, let's look around the world right now. The people in charge are not getting any younger. At the far end, Paul Biya has run Cameroon for more than 40 years. He's 93. Saudi Arabia's King Salman is 90. Now, Africa has several of the world's oldest leaders, running populations who are around a quarter of their age. Globally, the age gap isn't as glaring, but still stark. The average age of a world leader today is 63, while 30 is the average age of the person they govern. But every so often, there are exceptions. The leaders of Iceland, Burkina Faso, and Ecuador are all 38 years old, making them among the youngest leaders on the planet, which raises the question of why, in a world this young, power is so old.
Really, the gap is stark, and I would say one of the simplest answers is that it's very expensive to run as a candidate for politics. So it's not really that voters do not want young leaders, but it is something in the systems that makes it inherently difficult to become elected.
Aksel Sundström is a professor in political science at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, and his work focuses on the absence of young people in politics, and he's the co-author of the book Youth Without Representation. Good to have you with us, Aksel. Now, let's take a look at the leaders, for example, ranging from the youngest to the oldest. Now, on the left of the screen is the youngest leader, Nepal's Prime Minister Balen Shah at age 36. Next is Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky at 48. Canada's Mark Carney is 61. China's Xi Jinping is 72. Russia's Vladimir Putin is 73. India's Narendra Modi is 75, and there's Donald Trump, as we mentioned, at 80. And the world's current oldest leader is Cameroon's President Paul Biya, as we mentioned, 93 years old. Now, there's an argument that age brings wisdom and stability. Now, while others say many countries in the world have become gerontocracies, so where do you fall in that spectrum?
I guess both statements can be true. I think politics increasingly is recognized as being benefited by diversity, right? We don't want parliaments with only men. Maybe we want diversity between men and women, and likely voters prefer a diversity between young leaders and old leaders. But what we're seeing is dominance by the older ones. And I think the graphics you just showed very clearly tell us this story, and there's an additional element to this. This is also true in parliaments, the legislatures. So it's not only these single heads of governments that are old, but generally decision makers are 10 to 20 years older than the average voter. And that, to some people, is a democratic problem. I think one observation is that this is true for many regions of the world. So it's not only an explanation that Africa is different. So obviously, we've seen this in the US and we've seen this in China. So it's sort of a general phenomenon, I would say. The healthiest democracies in Europe has party systems that make young leaders a bit more, it's more easy to climb in those ladders.
Mm. And is this an old development, or is it something we're just noticing?
I would say it's coming along with several trends. So it is a phenomena that has been there for a while, but increasingly, not just because a lot of movements out there are youth movements putting the spotlight on this problem. So we've seen many movements in the global south where protests are actually voicing this concern. Don't forget the Arab Spring. One of the problems was that they felt that leadership are not legitimate.
All right, let's take a look at a map showing the countries with some of the world's oldest leaders. Saudi Arabia's King Salman, 90 years old. Cameroon's Paul Biya, 93. Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa at 83. The leaders of Uganda and Malawi are 81 and 71 years old, respectively. Are older or long-standing leaders who don't govern in democracies or in countries where the democracies are not free, are they skewing the numbers we're talking about?
Well, yes, in some ways there are outliers in the distribution you showed. Many are authoritarian countries, to be frank. But I think the evidence from the United States show us that this is not inherently about being an autocracy versus a democracy. We know that in many well-established democracies, leaders are quite old. And the US is obviously an example with the Senate and the House of Representatives as well.
I'm just wondering if we compare sort of politics to, say, the corporate world. The corporate world, I mean, most places you don't find as many 80-year-old, 90-year-old people running companies, yet we're more open to that in politics. The excuses or the reasons we would give for allowing or for not allowing them in corporate are not necessarily applied in the political setting.
It's an interesting reflection. I think sometimes we conflate experience with competence, and I think there's a lot of very competent young potential candidates out there, but they're not given the chance because of system failures. So it's either too expensive to run, or existing politicians are not interested in letting their seat be opened to competition. So this is an inherent dilemma for political parties. They must rejuvenate to attract new members, but the ones sitting at political seats are not willing to share power.
And how does this then play out? At what point does the gap between the age of the leaders and the age of the citizens become politically significant?
Well, we've seen in research, I myself have been doing that. For instance, voters in US, they are now starting to see this as a problem. When we compare scenarios where legislators are of a mixed age, people trust these legislators much more and the decisions they're making. Whereas in legislatures where there's much older members of the citizens, they are not as trusting in the decisions coming out of those legislators. So in the end, I think this is about democratic legitimacy, and this is important given that voter turnout is low among the young people, right? So we are risking the situation where young people are not so interested in participating if politics is seen as something for the older generations.
What's the risk there? Because, as you say, if people are turning away, yet some of the issues that the young people seem to care about, or the issues that will affect the young people the most, issues like climate change, for example, these people might feel they're underrepresented in the political class. So, just wondering, does it matter that they're, or how does it matter that they're underrepresented in tackling these issues?
I think it matters, and we've seen from protests that it's actually voiced among young groups that this is a problem. But also research has systematically shown that older legislators and younger legislators, they have different attitudes in policy questions and make different decisions. So it's shown that after a certain age, politicians stop talking about the future. So the word future and future-oriented speech becomes less common when they're older. And we've seen that when a young politician enters, there's more spending of public resources on daycare and those kind of issues that benefits the young in the end.
Interesting. Could you maybe point us to some countries or some examples where there has been success at bringing younger people into positions of real political power? Right.
So I would still say that many of the democracies in West Europe, there we have party systems that helps healthy competition between candidates, and it's not so expensive to run for elections. So in many of these countries, we see a diversity in age. And it's interesting because in many African countries, there are age quotas. And generally, the research sees that these age quotas, they are not helping so much, and it's more like a strategy for the elite to keep their power and to get in some young people, but not too many.
Just wondering as well, I mean, you've written extensively on youth underrepresentation in politics. Why is it that age is not as prominent a topic compared to, say, gender or ethnicity when it comes to political representation?
I believe that the idea is that many people, well, everyone gets older, right? So in some sense, this fairness will over time become adjusted. But the point is, if we never have presence of the young generations, those views will not be represented. So maybe at an individual level, fairness equals out over time, but fundamentally, the young generation will not have been represented.
I mean, earlier you spoke about the ways, the topics, for example, that younger people would tackle versus, say, older people. I'm just wondering, overall, though, governance, do we have evidence that shows that younger leaders govern differently compared to older leaders?
Yes, indeed. There is systematic evidence coming out from research showing this in quite convincing ways. For instance, in Japan, it shows that mayors, young mayors, they are more likely to spend public resources on daycare centers, quite convincingly showing that age matters in politics.
Okay, fair. Just wondering, if you were to look forward 20 years to go from now, do you think we will have more, or that world leaders will generally be much older than they are today, or younger?
My hope is that we will see more diversity. I think for the past 20 years, the development of gender equality has been very encouraging, and hopefully there will be a similar development in terms of age diversity in decision making. And well, for the sake of issues like climate change, I think there are good arguments for why we need more young legislators.
But where do you see it trending at the moment, at least based on what you can see?
Honestly, there are not trends in that direction. The line is actually quite flat. So we've seen for the past 10 or 20 years that parliaments are not really becoming younger. If anything, they're becoming slightly older. So the trends is not pointing in that direction.
Okay, it's been interesting getting your thoughts, Aksel Sundström from Gothenburg University. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
And what do you think about this issue? Is there too much power in the hands of older leaders? Do you live in a country where young people are absent from politics? Let us know in the comments below. I am Tomi Oladipo in Berlin. Thank you for watching.